So today we're getting personal. Who needs copy and paste? I mean, a ceremony just like the last one with a tweak and a name change? In fact, could you do this? No, the same as everyone else with a name change. Could you leave the outsider outside, write and lead the entire funeral yourself? Are you kidding me? Not a great time to be kidding. Well, the answer is yes, and you're about to meet someone who did what you think you can't. He wrote and he delivered his own mum's funeral.
A simple funeral podcast. Saying goodbye the way you want to. You've got this. Here's Mike Kinnaird.
So, tell me about your mum. When was she born? Any siblings? What was she like at school? First job? Best friends? First dates? Boyfriends? She met your dad where? Great cook. Burn the veg. On it goes. Notes are scribbled as fast as they can be scribbled, and sometimes the scribbles made sense and I could actually read them back later. Win! Sometimes I'd read them back and I never did remember why I wrote trousers in capitals, double underlined. The stories and the memories were so thick and fast I had time for the one-word scribble, and now I'm thinking, why on earth did I write that? Look, this is the problem, okay? Planning the funeral ceremony or service is intense. It's a recipe for overwhelm. And when you see this from all sides, it's easy to see why. So I'll explain why it is so full on and how to avoid it with a solution I suspect you just haven't thought about. Alistair didn't consider this obvious solution either. He just fell into it, and he's glad he did because it worked. Big time. As you'll hear later. Right, can we stop? Can we just stop? Just stop. Before we all get lost. Right, now look. I was a celebrant for a long time, and I've been the one meeting the family hundreds over the years, and it was me asking all those questions. And there's lots and lots of questions to ask. So, let me explain what usually happens. You've been to see the funeral director. You've told them you wanted a non-religious funeral, for example. So, the funeral director suggests a celebrant. You have no idea who they are, and probably no idea what they do, actually, or how any of this works. So, the funeral has been booked for your friend, family member, in around a week's time. You just said yes, and anyway, that means it'll all be over soon. But there's another but. In the boiling cauldron of instant decision-making, you didn't grasp what that meant. Not surprising. It means just days to get everything sorted, which might suit others, but not necessarily you. The celebrant chosen for you is already seeing other families, and they can't see you for a few of those time-limited days. Now it's the weekend. No, they can't see you that evening. You're busy the next day, but they could manage the next. The funeral is now 3 days away, and this isn't exaggeration because it happened to me most weeks for years. A complete stranger pitches up this celebrant. Apparently, they're the expert, and they apparently lead you down the path of what a funeral is supposed to be like. They might throw in a couple of suggestions about what would happen, but basically it's variations on a theme. It's assumed by some that you want to do what everyone else does, but maybe with a tweak here and there. Others will have a completely open mind, but... So this, as described, is what will likely happen if you don't know the options, and we'll look at something that you could do. But as ever, with all this stuff, alternatives aren't for everyone. The big advantage of agreeing to that celebrant and letting them plan the ceremony is that you don't have to. I've been in your shoes. A death in the family is massively confusing. It's a weird, dizzy, slow motion time. Everyone is asking questions, and you just want anyone, to say, look, leave it to me. I'll sort it out. Very tempting, often sensible, because you're not in the zone. So they'll explain what the usual is, music as we go into the chapel, there's introduction, then a tribute or a eulogy, whatever you want to call it, more music, maybe a poem, committal, would you still like a prayer? More music as we leave, etc. Tweak here and there. But basically, it's the same as everyone else, with a personalised tribute written by someone who has almost certainly never met the person in question. But here's one perfectly doable solution. You could write that tribute yourself. Call it a eulogy, it's the same thing. And read it on the day. Or, and now this is where it gets really interesting, you can write and present the entire funeral. The other option is getting a family member or friend to do that for you under your direction. Now, why would that be a good idea? Sounds bonkers. Surely you need an expert, like a celebrant or a humanist or clergy. I mean, they know what they're doing. They are the experts. I mean, what if I say the wrong thing? I miss out stuff that we have to include. I don't know about all the legal bits. I mean, what a nightmare. No, I bet you can't do all this by yourself, and I wouldn't trust our Dave to do it either. Okay, let's stop again and regroup. Okay, look. You can't make a mistake. It isn't possible. Because a funeral ceremony is exactly that. It's a ceremony. It ain't a legal requirement. So what you do and say at the funeral is your damn business. If you want to write anything or everything, well, the content and the tone is a matter for you. There's nothing to miss out. It's only what to put in. And that's your choice. The real pain is the limited time you get allocated to your funeral on the day in the chapel. That's another big gripe, and we can look at that another day. So as a funeral celebrant, I would get the call and then arrange to meet a family when all our diaries matched, and the timescale could be very tight to meet and plan and write and get it approved by a family before the day. All I could hope for is that I got the person and the story, that I offered suggestions, I spelled out what could happen and go with their decision. I wasn't there to instruct, I was there to guide. It isn't easy, it requires a lot of concentration, but I would never, ever dream of calling myself an expert. And neither should anyone else, because you're the expert. You know more than anyone right now. True, the celebrant has had more experience at leading funerals, but that doesn't make them an expert. It just means they've had practice, that's all. No, you, friend, you are the expert. You are the funeral director, because it should be you directing what happens next. The chances are you don't, because the whole occasion seems cloaked in mystery. You might have been to a funeral and you assume you know what happens because it was similar to the other one you went to. And that can happen, as I said before, because life can be easier for others if all this follows a neat and tidy path. If the next funeral ceremony is pretty similar to this one, the truth is you have a whole world of choices and options right there in front of you. Far too many to chat through now because it's just too confusing. We've got plenty of weeks ahead of us. And so we concentrate on just one, and it's arguably the baddest and the biggest in the set. What about planning, creating, writing and delivering the entire funeral? Alistair did exactly that for his mum.
Well, Mike, I'm not actually sure that I wanted to do that. I think I felt it was something I could do.
So it's out of a lack of knowledge in that sense that made you actually stand there and do it. But it worked, quite clearly it worked. And did it work for you on a number of levels then?
Yes, I mean, I think it did work, but I think quite often in life you kind of don't know what you can't do. So I didn't know I couldn't do it, so I just did it. I thought, well, I'll just do it. I'll create it. And I'd seen you do a service which went really, really well. what would be really useful would be to have someone who's very aware of how these things work and timings and what would be good to put in, what form of words might be appropriate, how it works in terms of music and that sort of thing, because this is the first time I've done that, and I think it would be really useful to have that guidance.
So some guidance on actually how to structure it, and also the words you can use and how to structure those words and so on.
Yeah, really, that would be really, really useful, because there's so much to think about when you've got a funeral coming up.
So you decided to do it by yourself, you wrote all the words, you delivered the entire ceremony yourself, the entire service yourself. How did you feel at the end of the process?
I thought it was quite cathartic.
You were able to structure that celebration the way that fitted you and you knew would fit your family, because you weren't following anyone else's preconceived ideas, were you?
No, I wasn't. I kind of made it up. But as I say, I had seen you. I'd been at a service that you'd led and done very, very effectively, and I suspect there was some structure that came from that. That it is the devil is in the detail, Mike. And that's where you need somebody who's going to engage fully with this process. It is a job that needs to be done. And if you're able and willing and capable of doing it, fine. I think it can be a great experience.
Unfortunately, when you hire outsiders, mistakes can be made. We've all heard the horror stories of the name that was wrong through the whole service. Family wondering who the hell they've been listening to, because that didn't sound like it was about Auntie Margaret at all. I mean, are we even in the right funeral? It happens. People make genuine mistakes. They don't mean to. It just happens. It's sod's law. Fortunately, I never did get the name wrong. But the whole worry of that kept me firing on all cylinders, and I made sure I sent material to the family to check over before I read it on the day. If I had got the name wrong, I'm pretty sure they'd be quick telling me. Why am I so aware of all this? Well, because it happened to me. My dad's name was wrong all the way through his funeral ceremony, and I've never forgotten what it feels like. You won't make that mistake because you can't. Yep, as you heard Alistair say, it's a job to be done. You can easily do it yourself. You know the story. The family and the friends know that you know the story. When I've heard family speak fluently, giggling at some childhood memory, you can see the guests relax and smile. They've heard all this 1,000 times before, and they're willing this family member along. I did the best I could every time, but I couldn't compete with someone who's lived that life, who saw it all firsthand. I could write the words, but I could never replay the soul of the story. I wasn't there. So much better, more authentic, to do that instead of booking an outsider to do that. So we're all agreed. Okay, now, as hinted, there's a serious stack of questions stacking up in your head right now. And you're saying, well, look, he's making this out sound to be a walk in the park. It can't be, for example. He hasn't explained. Where do you start? How do you structure the tribute? Never mind the whole service. Where do the stories come from? The music? How will I be able to stand there and read those words out loud? It's going to be emotional. Yes, it is. But there are some tricks to help. And anyway, you also know now that you can hand the delivery to someone else who's close. All the questions in your head right now are fantastic questions, so keep them coming. And we'll come back to all this bit by bit, tick off one box at a time, because you know it can be done. So at some stage over the next weeks, we'll look at how it can be done. And like most things in life, you don't need to bag an expert, because we know what I'm going to say. You are the expert. Next time, we need to think. Take time out. If we're going to plan something this important, we need to work out exactly what we want in the first place. So I'm out just after 7 o'clock in the morning for a walk with my wife. Clear the head, forget everything, and find the perfect place to plan. It's amazing what you see when you look.
That was another Simple Funeral podcast with Mike Kinnaird. Any way we can help you, then email Mike right now. Mike@thebestspeeches.com. Mike@thebestspeeches.com.